distortion of time with it.
Okay. And would that also go for something like precognition as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what is precognition? You're seeing the future that hasn't happened yet. And, people that do that in dreams, I even kind of liken it to when you have an intuition or a sort of a gut feeling, a hunch even, that maybe we're accessing information in that field where there is no linear time. Outside of the construct of the human brain, we're able to access information in different timelines that we're not normally able to. And so we get that sort of feeling of, oh my God, this is going to happen. And then 2 weeks later it happens. And we all have, I think we've all had that happen to us, and I think we all know people that have experienced that.
Okay. And given the fact that cases like that don't involve like a literal time machine that we jump into and program in a certain date or time, I mean, are there any theories as to how the human brain or mind or some essence of us actually does that?
It's information. It's, one of the theories, one of the most popular theories is the holographic universe theory, which also mirrors the holographic brain theory, the idea being that consciousness exists, it's sort of projected onto the brain, as well as memory. And there is a real belief that memory may be projected onto the brain from an outside source, which would explain why people with brain damage are still able to access memories that they shouldn't. So the idea being that, here we are in our limited bodies with our limited brain ability, but there is a field of information, and it's been called everything from the Akashic field to the zero-point field to the morphic field. Larry and I have called it the grid for years, that somehow we are able to access, whether you're remote viewing or having a prophetic vision or a dream of something that's going to happen, or even a past life recall. We're able to tap into information in that field that normally the brain filters out because it really doesn't have a need to know that information on a day-to-day survival basis. Okay.
And what about time slips? When people talk about suddenly and sort of spontaneously they drift into the past and, have an experience there and suddenly they're back in the modern era again.
Yeah, a lot of those happen in your old neck of the woods.
Yeah, that's true.
England, I don't know what it is about that country, but
the beer.
And it's funny because I discovered them when I read Jenny Randall's, who's a wonderful investigative journalist. She wrote a book called Time Storms, where she documented all over the world these really bizarre situations where people might be out walking the dog, taking a 10-minute walk up to 7-Eleven or what have you. And suddenly they enter a sort of electrical fog, or it might be a green mist. There always seems to be some kind of mist or fog, which, people who have studied the Bermuda Triangle and the Devil's Triangle, you hear about that mist and fog quite a bit. So they sort of are engulfed with this fog, and when they come out of it, they could be hundreds of miles up the road from where they intended to be, and hours have passed. They only thought they were going for a 10-minute jog. 5 hours later, they're in another city. It seems like these things are locational, that there are certain places on the planet where the environmental influences are just right to allow a sort of manipulation of, could be the electromagnetic field, what have you. I think it's also something internally that's going on with particular people. These time slips don't happen to everybody. They happen to certain individuals. So one of the things that Larry and I have been researching for years is how certain internal and external influences align together to create these kinds of experiences. And that's why they're so erratic and so inconsistent, because for those alignments to take place, you have to have an awful lot of different things fall into place. Missing time, that's another sort of time slip, and I've had that. I actually experienced that in Los Angeles many years ago. It's terrifying. I lost 2 hours of time on a freeway. Wow. Somehow my body went into autopilot and I was able to navigate the 134 freeway up in Glendale and not die or kill anyone in the process. But I ended up way off course from where I had intended to go, which was Pasadena. hours later, and it was just black. It was nothing. I have no idea what went down in those 2 hours.
Wow.
So that's a different way that time kind of plays tricks on us. It just sort of shuts down on us.
So you had kind of like a vested interest in writing the book for that reason, I guess, alone. So.
Well, yeah, and Larry had a really cool one too, and his was really cool because it happened to 5 or 6 people. They were on an investigation, and they had parked their cars in a parking lot. They were kind of out in the woods, I think in northern Arkansas. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, but they were going back to their cars, and they had no problem going back and forth before. I think they were walking along railroad tracks, which kind of led back to the parking lot. And what should have taken, half an hour, 2-3 hours later, they couldn't find the parking lot. Everybody felt disoriented. And they followed the same exact path. And everybody later reported feeling like they had just lost 2-3 hours of time. It just, nothing. They couldn't account for, how they ended up from point A on the path to where they ended up, and that dang parking lot should have been in the middle somewhere. So, and I hear you hear them too. We hear these stories all the time, and some people equate them with things like, abductions. I've never had any reason to believe that's what happened with me, but I don't really want to find out.
Okay. Well, that said, when you said, you don't really want to find out, I mean, as the author or the co-author yourself, I mean, what are your views on the whole angle of, the ethics of time travel and, should we go back to kill Adolf Hitler or, could it end up with something worse if we did, I mean.
Can you imagine what would be worse? But it's true. Well, let's just say, okay, if you had asked me before I wrote the book, would you take advantage of time travel? I would have said, hell yeah. I would, although I'm not like most people. I would have wanted to go back to the past, but only into my childhood because I had such a cool childhood. But I really would have wanted to maybe see the future. Now, 99.9% of the people that we talk to want to go back to the past. They want to fix something. They have a regret. They want to fix it. They screwed up. They want to make it right and see if they could have gotten their life on a different trajectory. But after writing the book, if you asked me, if you set a time travel device right out in front of me and said, go ahead, you're not going to die, you'll come back in one piece, I would say no. And that comes from really taking a good hard look at these paradoxes, but also things like the butterfly effect, cause and effect, and how one minor change in your timeline would affect and change the timelines of every single person that you came in contact with after that. Do you have that right? And like you said, if you think you're doing it for a good reason, like I'm going to go back and I'm going to kill Hitler before he can, pull off what he did. What if by doing that, you then cause the deaths of 50 million people instead of 6 million? Now we could say, maybe you would have stopped any deaths from occurring. But what if the timeline would have, we can't see where the timeline is going to go. We don't see the trajectory when we're in it. And one of the things that we discovered was that there was a book by Stephen King that he had just released when we were doing the book called 11/22/63 about a guy who is told by a man who has a time travel portal, I need you to go back and stop the death of JFK. I need you to go back and stop the assassination. And, I don't want to give the book away because it's absolutely brilliant. It's one of the best examinations of time travel paradoxes I have ever read. But again, it brings up that whole thing. He goes back and tries to do something. What kind of havoc does he create by doing what he thought was a good thing? And the other thing was a Family Guy episode where, if anybody watches Family Guy, the little baby talks. Yeah, do you? Okay, so Stewie and Brian went back to try to, I think they were trying to stop 9/11 from happening. I think Peter caused it or something. I don't know, that show's bizarre, but, then it shows what happened when they did that. And I think there was like a nuclear war that was the end result of them going back and changing something they thought they were doing a really good thing. So looking at stuff like that, I said, you know what? I don't want to mess with my past. It got me where I am. This is obviously the trajectory of my life. I am a big believer in destiny. I don't know. I'd be so afraid that even just going back and observing would disrupt something on a quantum level and mess up not just my timeline, but everybody that I ever came in contact with. I feel really guilty if I did that.
Okay. Just quickly to go back to the time slip angle, just something occurred to me. Are the people who've reported time slips where they've actually gone forward rather than backwards?
It seemed like it was both. There are a lot of really cool stories about people who had a time slip, and during the time slip, they might go into a pub. Again, a lot of the reports came out of England, or they might go into a restaurant, and they notice that everybody around them is dressed kind of, not with the times, not very modern. Mm-hmm. And when they come out of the time slip and they're back where they should be, and they go back and try to find those pubs or those restaurants, they're told by people who live in the area, oh, no, that place was torn down 100 years ago. So you have both time slips that take you into the past and into the future. And I think that is a really good piece of circumstantial evidence that everything exists, at once, past, present, and future, in this field that is exterior to the human brain. And every now and then, everything aligns perfectly where we get a glimpse of that, where we go beyond linear time.
Okay. Well, that's a good place for us to pick up when we come right back from a short commercial break. And just a reminder to our audience, you can visit our website and find out more about EPIC at epicvoyages.com. or visit our YouTube channel, Epic Voyages, for free video presentations. And we'll see you shortly. Hi, this is Nick Redfern again, and you're listening to Epic Voyages. And our guest tonight is Marie D. Jones, who, with Larry Flaxman, is the co-author of many books, but the one we're talking about tonight is her latest, which is This Book is from the Future, which, as you can probably guess from the title, is all about time travel, feasibilities of it, theories for it, and whether or not we should travel in time, and various experiences that people have had. So, Marie, to sort of get back into it, I know there's a story or a scenario, if you like, that links time shifts and time changes with solar activity. Can you talk about that one?
Yeah, that was a theory that there's a few people that talk about this theory, but this woman named Starfire Tor is very well known, and some people agree with her work, some find it to not have a whole lot of scientific credibility. But the idea is that solar activity creates changes in the electromagnetic field of both, the Earth and the Sun, and all kinds of collective time slips occur. And we'll call them time shifts because, again, they're not just happening to one or two people walking out on a dark road at night. They're happening to large groups of people. One of the most popular time shifts that people like to talk about are celebrity deaths that people seem to remember, like Kirk Douglas is the big one. Many, many years ago, a large group of people thought Kirk Douglas had died, and there was, it was going viral, and people saw the funeral, and poor Michael Douglas's son was crying on TV, and blah, blah, blah. And, well, he didn't die. He was alive and well for quite a while. And so the theory is that what had happened is something environmentally, something external caused a shift in the perception of time for a large group of people. And they actually jumped ahead and saw somebody's death who didn't really die. And that's sort of a funny example. But these time shifts are linked to